lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it.
Hello, hello. How is it feeling in here right now? It's feeling like a lot of us feel like we barely made it and we're really glad to be here, right? And so lucky to be held by the beauty and beats of Sunny Chiba. And what's special about the many layers of collaboration that are at play in this space is that Sunny and I get to collaborate on Queer Aperitivo all the time with Jenna, our partner in crime here. And we're so, it actually has everything to do with the name of this panel, right? So I just really quickly, Sunny, wanted you to just say, yeah, I told you I was gonna do this. I know, okay. But just say like, how is this fitting into what you do beyond just literally mixing?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, besides from DJing, I'm also a farmer by day. So food and music is, I feel like, my tools for revolution and for feeding and nurturing our people. So grateful for Queer Aperitivo, who I DJ for, to fundraise for many Black and brown farms and mutual aid food groups that feed our people throughout New York City. So thank you.
Let's give it up for Sunny. This comrade is a farmer by day and a DJ by night. Like, I don't understand when you sleep. Thank you for being here. We're so grateful to Robert and Stoney and the folks who are making Everybooty a space that's about generative pleasure, not just, and joining together as queers, not just as a form of escape, but actually of tapping in. And connecting to, of course, the history and the present and, inshallah, the future of Pride as fomenting revolution, right? So these are folks here who are able to share some different experiences and perspectives of producing, curating, cultivating parties, cultural spaces, nightlife, hospitality. And why we wanted to have this conversation right now is, to be honest, I every day ask myself, what am I doing? How the hell can I be doing this? And then every day I do find answers, often with these folks and with all y'all, our community who gather in different spaces. The one that I am primarily cultivating is Queer Aperitivo. For me, we drew on Aperitivo as this incredible societal level pause in Italy, where I have ancestors, where it's this almost deeply anti-capitalist practice, right? And so saying that it's literally this collective pause in public of slowing down and de-emphasizing productivity and washing it away, but not just going into nuclear families or couple mode or private dinner things, but this very public shared space. So that is where I'm coming from and where I'm basing kind of my current ideas and questions about using hospitality and nightlife in radical ways to feed and fortify our people. And there will always be contradictions, and we will always be imperfectly struggling. We cannot wait to be healed in order to do this work fully. So that's one of the things we felt could be most useful is having honest conversation about the power and the beauty that we've all seen and experienced, as well as the challenge and the questions. So this to ground us is because in the spirit of bringing in all kinds of voices from past, present, and future, this is Jose Esteban Munoz's Cruising Utopia, which some people here might be familiar with, the then and there of queer futurity. Not very good at the academic, but what I love is it says, queerness is also a performative because it is not simply a being, but a doing for and toward the future. Queerness is essentially about the rejection of a here and now and an insistence on potentiality, on concrete possibility for another world. We must dream and enact new and better pleasures, other ways of being in the world, and ultimately new worlds. So I am going to first pass the mic to Karen, and everybody's going to introduce ourselves and kind of sharing our experience with these questions and challenges, and these new and old worlds that we've been a part of, the stories of.
Hi, Hi, my name is Karen Song. I'm actually not a nightlife proprietor. I don't know how you'd say, but I'm actually making a documentary about the early 90s nightlife scene for lesbians specifically. Through doing this project, and also I'm a born and raised New Yorker, nightlife has always been really, I don't know, it's just been in my blood. It's something that I crave, I love. I still love it even though I'm not able to do so much of it now. I'm now a mom and just older and tired. But yeah, it is. And sometimes I do bring my baby with me, so it's great. But through doing this documentary, it really kind of, first we just wanted to kind of celebrate this amazing space that existed. It was really unique for the time, and even looking back now, it's still very unique. And I'm actually going to show a trailer to kind of give a context easier than what I can explain. But it really called the question of like, why, so many of us who came through that scene still today, like, there might be some like old people nostalgia thing happening, but we understand that there's something really special happening then, but nobody can really put their finger on it other than like bemoaning gentrification, the village being dispersed as a queer and creative mecca, and there were so many other factors, but we knew there was something happening and something about the early 90s. And as we kind of unraveled the onion layers, we couldn't help but get to what that era was about, which was activism, so much of which we see the fruits of today. And specifically AIDS activism and how that brought our community together. It also coincided with, third wave feminism, the activism. There's so many things that came together in the early 90s, and this party happened between 1993 and 1995 in the East Village at this place called Café Tabac. And it really, if you look upon so many milestones in our movement, you can look at 1993, it just keeps coming back. And we keep asking, like, why 1993? And this is, it's so interesting to see this in today's context. That was after 12 years of Reagan-Bush devastation, really hardline Christian right, just wreaking devastation. And I think the onus to want to tell the story is because it feels like our history, we don't have the resources to continue telling like deep stories. It's always kind of superficial in terms of the history that we are able to document and who gets to actually have archives. It costs money. It's like you see the same kind of populations within the LGBTQ communities that, if there's any history to be told, those are the stories that are told. So, we're kind of like isolated in our generations, in our stories, in our history. And because we can't connect the dots, we can't see what happened before and how we fought and how we organized. And the reason why I think this film could provide value for our current times is to kind of show a roadmap for how we did it then, and how, to kind of like something that can be translatable to today. So without further ado.
There's not such a great sense of history. People don't even know what went before, even not that long ago.
It was a moment in time that we shared that was about being gay. It was about being queer and having this culture that was ours.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that place. It's supposed to be the most beautiful women in the world. I said, yeah, they're pretty hot.
Eye candy galore. I was just sitting there quiet and shy but drooling.
The looks were just like off the runway.
People were coming and seeing different versions of women they had never seen before. And it kept growing. It was never the same from week to week.
The media was really getting interested in lesbians and talking about lipstick lesbians. It's the 1990s, it's hip to be queer, and I'm a big dyke. And then I had to hold for people screaming and applauding. It became profoundly important to come out.
AIDS activism years paved the way for so much of the future of the LGBT community.
Women in LGBT politics were filling the void.
Suddenly, everyone was in the same room, fighting for the same thing. We were a community and we acted like a community.
Nothing was going to change unless we could talk more and more about the specifics of sex.
AIDS forced a visibility to homosexuality, and the rest of the country had to grapple with it.
The lesbian movement was part of the larger women's movement.
Who you calling a bitch?
We were feeling powerful in our voice. We protested and we saw results.
Political energy of not wanting anyone else to define you, that coming out moment led to the celebration of all different expressions of one's identity.
People were coming into their own and saying, I want to be who I am.
It's one thing to meet in darkness, and it's another thing to do fashion forward. You are like making a statement. You're getting dressed up for this. You're going to be seen down the street looking hot, and you're going to turn a left into Cafe Tabac.
As a young woman, to see empowered women and beautiful women coming together in such an intelligent and sexy and trend-setting way.
It totally changed my life.
Helped me just own who I was.
Tabac definitely gave birth to my confidence.
How revolutionary it was to see people who are different, and it gives you permission to be yourself. That's life-saving.
It really was ground zero because you could see all these people and things that happened from it.
Beauty has cachet, but it's also about what you bring to that, how you can work it.
It was a smorgasbord of all the people you want to eat. I want to eat you all. I wanted to eat them all. I wanted to be eaten.
The reason why Cafe Tabac was so special and why nothing was like it, you know, the co-hosts, co-creators, black and brown women. And that was, and in such an elevated space. And it was kind of like a signaling of expanding beyond our kind of like queer ghettos. They dared to walk into like the most popular, most like unbelievable space in downtown New York at the time, and just were like, we want to do a party here. And then they're like, okay. They give them a trial period, and it went wildly successful. And then now, you know, it's become stuff of legends. But I think, you know, to your point of our, you know, nightlife spaces as political spaces, I think, I mean, inherently, I think, you know, I mean, even the history. So one of the things that I've been able to do with this film is really kind of go into the history of our spaces. And throughout history, there's an integral connection between, you know, activism and like just our ability to gather. I mean, as we all know, that has been a threat to the status quo. That is something that when we become more kind of like a police militaristic state, we're always under, our spaces are under threat as well as our bodies. And you can look at, you know, whenever there's a turning point in history where a lot of, you know, whether it's the Great Depression or, you know, there's always a scapegoat, and they always point straight to us, right? So there, you know, because we don't know the history, we don't know how many times in history our nightlife have thrived, and they've just been clamped down in these specific moments. You know, you could look at even the history of like the El Dorado and the Weimar, you know, and then in World War I, when we had these places that were like new cities because all these new migrations happened because of World War I, like San Francisco, there were these bars that existed, and there was a protest and a riot because the police tried to shut that down. And so we keep seeing this throughout history, and we don't have the ability to connect the dots because we don't have the funds to do our histories and, you know, tell our stories, so we don't know this. But I think Tobacco was so interesting because the co-hosts, they didn't say this is an inherently political space, they just created this canvas that welcomed everybody and allowed everyone to use it how they needed it to be, whether for care, outside, you know, doing all the work out on the streets, or the mourning from all the people we lost during that time. Wow, we had so many incredible stories of that, and you know, the space is open to everybody. But because it was co-hosted by lesbians, it mainly drew lesbians and lesbians of color. But you know, I think the genius of nightlife is that you can do things in creative ways, and it allows this kind of poetic space. So the co-host, Shari Nash, is a DJ, and she really infused the space with this kind of like quiet power, I would say. The music that she played signaled a different kind of queer space, and it was very political. It was music you did not hear in other queer bars. It was mainly black music, of diaspora, and reaching through time, and it just signaled a different kind of political space, but there was also care to it. It was very soulful, it was very chill. So, I don't know. I can speak more on things, but I think I would love to be more in conversation.
Actually, that is an incredible segue to Tanu. Thinking about diaspora and music and care and culture making. And so, Tanu, I'll just let you tell him everything.
Okay. That's a very tough act to follow, just letting you know. But really just so inspiring, and I'm so appreciative that you asked me to be on this panel. And just to, on what you said, like I do feel like, you know, when we're creating these, whether it's nightlife spaces, we don't have that much opportunity to talk about the archive of like what has come before us, because none of us are here because we did it by ourselves, right? Because we were inspired by many things, and it's decades and decades of like queer organizing in the making. So I just really want to honor that. My full name is Tanushka. My last name is Yakupitiage. Bonus points if you all figure out how to pronounce that by the end of the evening. And my DJ name is Ushka. So Tanu by day, Ushka by night. You can call me whichever, it's my name. I'm a DJ and an organizer, and I came into DJing from political work. My sort of professional work is, I used to do immigrant rights organizing. I used to work at the New York Immigration Coalition. I moved into climate justice organizing. I worked at 350.org, which is a global climate justice organization, and now I have the privilege of being a resource mobilizer. I run a BIPOC climate justice fund at a foundation, where I'm trying to like take these rich people's institutional money and put it in the hands of BIPOC-led environmental and climate justice, housing justice work. So that's sort of my day life. I'm an immigrant. I moved to the US in 2003. I'm aging myself, but for college. And I'm originally from Sri Lanka, and I grew up in Thailand. and I moved to the US from Thailand. And I've lived in New York now for like 16, 17 years. And when I moved to the States, I had the opportunity of just like meeting all of these just dope black and brown queer people who were club kids, and I think I was just trying to find myself, and I found myself at the club. I found myself with all of these like black and brown and queers, trans folks, like lesbians, bisexual folks. Shout out to the bisexuals, they're often invisibilized. Just like queer folks who were really just like shifting things. And I'm just a music head, and growing up in Asia, like we're very influenced by the US, like American culture, American music, like everyone's watching MTV and Channel V, which is a very Asian thing, and we're taking in those influences. And I had the privilege of growing up in several parts of the world, the UK and Sri Lanka and Thailand, and so I have I feel really lucky to have that sort of like global perspective. And my dream was to move to New York City, and I did that, and it was really fucking hard as an immigrant. And just to connect the dots to this moment, like I moved to the US on a student visa. And so when I think about what's happening right now at universities all around the country, to students who are so vulnerable on F1 visas, it is deeply, deeply triggering. And so I, for the first 12 years of my time in the US, was hustling on different visas, shifting from a student visa to an H-1B visa, which is a very difficult, sort of structured visa where you can't do things out of like a certain job. And so I came to DJing partially because I was super depressed, trying to figure out a way to stay. And nightlife was the place I felt free, like queer nightlife. There was a party back in the day called Sweat. That, did Remarkable DJ that party? Kane, that was Kane's party, yeah. So I started going to that party, and I was just like really inspired by these DJs who were really creating spaces. And I was also going to a lot of like spaces where there was a lot of male DJs. Shout out to the guys who ran Que Bajo. I don't know if people remember that party, but that was also a really important party that was bringing together like Latino culture with other global culture, and it was a space that was really for immigrants. And I one day was like, you know what? Like, I want to create spaces. Like, I'm tired of being afraid, and I'm tired of feeling like I can only follow a certain set of rules as an immigrant. And I want to contribute to culture in New York. And so that's when I started sort of bedroom DJing, and then like connecting with primarily like men of color at the time who were running a lot of spaces. And then I started a party called Ibomba with my homie DJ Beto, which we ran out of Bembe. I'm gonna start just naming like a lot of things because like it's all really important to the archive. As I was sort of coming up as a DJ, Brooklyn Boyhood was happening, and so I would also be in Brooklyn Boyhood spaces. That's how Ryan and I know each other. That's how I sort of got into nightlife, was out of like a desire to create spaces, and a desire to create spaces where queer people and immigrants and BIPOC folks were centered, as sort of a parallel track to my work as an organizer. Because my work in New York at the time was literally like working to stop people's deportations. And so it's really, the moment we're in is interesting because like for me, I feel like it's Groundhog Day, what's happening, because I started doing immigrant rights organizing during the Obama administration. And I want to just remind people that Obama was called the deporter-in-chief. Obama deported 400,000 people in a year. And so like a lot of that immigrant rights work that was happening during the Obama administration like a lot of what's happening now was actually happening then. It was just talked about differently. There were vans that were picking up, like ICE vans picking up people in Flatbush, in Queens. People were extremely, extremely scared. And so when I think about organizing, I also think about like, we need to learn from the folks who have been doing this work for a minute. I was running, know your rights trainings. I was supporting undocumented youth before deferred action for childhood arrivals. It's called DACA was a thing, which was like a temporary stay for undocumented youth. And I was working at the time on like comprehensive immigration reform, which, whatever, I can get into my like nerdy, like the politics of immigrant rights. But like doing that kind of policy work was like really hard. And I needed something that was different, and that was parallel. And so that's one of the reasons why I came into nightlife. And so I was really, and right now I have the honor of like, I run a party called Chaotica with my homegirl Riobamba. That's also like, we do a lot of mutual aid. We're collaborating with Queer Aperitivo. June 25th, we're having a party on the Honey's rooftop, which is gonna be funds for Gaza Mutual Aid. And then I also I DJ Lilith, which is a Swana party often. I also DJ Poppy Juice a lot. And so like my community really is all of these folks who are creating like just really important nightlife over the last many years. I also, I used to DJ with Yalla, which is another Swana party, with Quebajo, which is a more Latino-centric party, with Raga, which is a West Indian queer party. And I also just want to shout out Venus X, who did Get a Gothic, Juliana Huxtable, who did Shock. And I bring up all these things because there's so many people in this community, and there's so many BIPOC-led spaces. I also want to shout out Bubble Tea, which I also have DJ'd a lot. And I feel because like a lot of my, the way in which I DJ and think about music is that I actually am really interested in telling migration stories. And I think that you can do that through music. And so if you ever hear one of my sets, like, it's a global journey. It's a global club journey on purpose, because, we live in a world where people are literally trying to restrict our access and to create these borders that are non-existent. And through music, I really try to demonstrate and show that we are all connected. And the only thing that we can do is to live in solidarity with each other. And so that's what I try to do through my music, and hopefully that I attempt to do in political organizing and resource mobilization.
And how perfect to listen. How perfect to listen to Tanu with this beat. Like, this is so good. So also shout out to Robert and the team again for creating this space. So it's like we're at the club and we get to talk about the why and the who and the how of it, right? And that's the thing that when Jenna and I and my Queer Aperitivo partner, and the people we collaborate with, we think so carefully about who is involved and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. For us, it's about literally where are we sourcing our ingredients for the food? And are we supporting queer and indigenous and Black and immigrant producers in that, so that when we're gathering and we're having drinks and we're having food, we're also generating real resources for a solidarity-based local food system, right? So I want to now, who is a part of this thread that we're weaving here, or tapestry, I should say, pass the mic to Ryan.
Mic check. Oh, it works. Damn, it's been a minute since I talked on a microphone. Amplified sound. How's everybody doing? Yeah, I feel really honored to be just a part of this conversation, and it felt really good to hear both of you and think about how all of these stories are so connected. And it's crazy that you even talked about Sweat, because that was like my direct inspiration to starting to do parties with Brooklyn Boyhood. Shout out to Kane Cutswell. And Kane was definitely like, it was the early 2000s, but Kane was like the 90s. Like the spirit of the spaces that Kane created, like light incense, drum circles. It was just something that I'd never experienced. And I think for a lot of us who came here searching for each other, that was, it was just one of the first places that I felt liberated and just completely like embodied. And also just was able to look around and be like, my people. So that was like definitely a gift. Like I have a like distinct memory of being like in the basement of Deity. This is so disgusting, thinking about it now. But I remember being so like peak joy that I jumped up. The ceiling was really low, and like hit the ceiling, and sweat droplets just fell on like all of us. So nasty, right? But we were like, yeah, because it was us. It was just like very like raw and real, and felt, it's so disgusting now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, we'll go with that. But yeah, and I know that like, Brooklyn Boyhood was literally a derivative, because we started out because we had an idea to create a calendar. There used to be this calendar called, I think like I Love Brooklyn Girl. I don't know. It was just a very like novelty based thing, and I was like, we should do this for like Black mass folks. It was also at a time of like a huge gender revolution, so like transness and all of these things were like really new in terms of like mainstream conversations. And I'm saying mainstream, our mainstream, definitely not what we're experiencing today. And so there was this like desire to create a space and also create media and projects that really showed just like the depth of our communities and how different we were doing shit, and also how fly we were. So we were like, yo, let's make this calendar, like it'll be fun and cute. Very new entrepreneurial venture, so did not look up how much printing costed. I was like, print's gotta be cheap. It's fucking 2009, like nobody is printing shit anymore. Printing is not cheap. It will never be cheap. It costs money to print things. So we literally like made this thing, sent the thing in. We're like, cool, like how much were you like 300? They were like 3K. And I was like, damn. So we maxed out our credit cards. I think I literally signed up for a credit card. My partner at the time, Genesis, signed up for one. We were just like, fuck it. We have to. And then we were like, what do we know how to do? Like, how can we raise money to pay for the shit that we made so that we can sell this thing? Because no one knew who we were. We were like begging people, please be in this calendar. And so, we went to Kane and we were like, hey, I think we'd be good at throwing parties. We're like literally the most fun people at your parties, right? So like, we should, remember the sweat, everything? So we're like, we should just do that. Like, it seems super easy. We'll just like make a flyer. And Kane's like, come here. And so, we really look up to Kane. They were our barber at the time. So we would literally just be sitting in a chair. Kane also has a barbershop on Malcolm X right now that is for queer folks, and it's a really beautiful space. But yeah, so Kane was like, I'll show you the ropes. Like, this is, so we're like, all right, cool. We're gonna charge like $2 for shots and like figure this out. And haphazardly, with Kane's guidance, started throwing these parties in people's homes that we knew. Like anyone with a nice apartment, we're like, yo, could you do this? We'll give you an eighth of weed and like some of the money or whatever. So we started doing these parties all around Brooklyn, and in different people's homes. Some of the times we were houseless ourselves, and people were letting us use their space to like throw these really amazing house parties, like borrowing, my homie's block party speaker or whatever. And so, they were shut down a lot from the police. It was at a time where Brooklyn was being gentrified like crazy, so there was so much NYPD. Like, they were walking like groups of 10 and 20, just up and down blocks, just intimidation tactics and shit. So we were shut down all the time. We were also, very new, so we didn't really have equipment. It was, now I think about it, it's kind of crazy that this was acceptable, but I think it was just like, we were capturing a moment where there were so many young queers, that were like coming to Brooklyn or living or being from there, and really trying to like break down what our identities were. Like, we wanted to just explore like what gender looked like. I remember going to other parties, no disrespect to Lover Girls, but I remember going And then literally like going like this, how loose are your jeans? 20. You know, like it was just very, because we're all just kind of moving through life with these like heteronormative examples of how to be. And I think there was a lot of us who were like, what could it be to not do this? So I think that was a really huge part of us feeling like we wanted to create these like mechanisms for visibility and like be the forefront of the space. And with that, you know, we learned, shout out to Brown Boy Project for like politicizing me around gender justice and masculine privilege, and also for the femmes in our community who were like, this shit's feeling real boys club. You know, there's gotta be a way to make this space feel safer for me, because I don't, like, that's not always my experience. And we were just like, what? So we took a lot of that community feedback and started to just really also, like, it was a deep excavation of ourselves and figuring out like how we were approaching life and the privileges we had and the ways that we weren't being accountable to our femme folks. And so, yeah, there was a lot of just work that we were doing individually and together, and just conversations. And we, you know, started to create sort of like a ethos that we made sure people were on board with before they even walked through the door, you know. I think now a lot about like how nowadays is and like all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, we were doing that in our own ways. And so eventually, you know, we got shut down by the police so much that was becoming really dangerous. So we moved into venues, and it reminds me of what you're talking about with Cafe Tabac, because they literally just be like, you want to do a what? You want to do a party here? Like, no. So it was really difficult. Eventually, we would find spaces that would let us, and we would, I mean, literally consistently sold out parties from the house parties, 2009, deep into the 2020s. There was a point in time where for literally like a decade, every party was sold out. So, and we still would go to new venues and they're like, probably not. Like, we don't believe you. We think this will be dangerous because it's a lot of niggas, and, you know. So it was just a lot of just navigating all of that. And then we started to like train the staff at these venues. Like, I would literally go and hold workshops with the bouncers and be like, this is how you address people. This is, like, if anything is ever escalating, we have a safety team here. Like, call us first, don't do shit, we got it, you know? And so it was a really huge responsibility, and it always didn't go great. Like, most of the time it did, but there was so much shit that was happening and so much that we were holding. And I get really sad thinking about Sweat. And also Brooklyn Boyhood, I'm not doing parties anymore. And a lot of it is because of just us as a community like struggling with how to deal with conflict. You know, Sweat ended, I remember it because an incident happened and people felt scared and no one came again. And it was super sad. And I'm getting emotional because it's also very connected to how the reason that I'm not doing stuff anymore with this collective, and just how, you know, there isn't, like, I think there's so many challenges with us as being like people who are experiencing trauma, and just not having a blueprint, not having like the skills, or thinking we have the skills, but still relying on like very like punitive and carceral and just very like disposable mechanisms that are not ever gonna get us to liberation. And so I think I just like, you know, I feel very hopeful that we can get to a space where we do a better job at like looking inward, and also, you know, looking at situations and figuring out like, if healing is the goal, like, what's the path? Because it feels really, I didn't know I was gonna get emotional today. But yeah, it just feels very like, I feel like now I have a new mission, and that is to take just like all of the examples that I see of how, you know, a lot of those things happen, and I have like a new idea, a new project that I'm working on that will be rooted in like what a community accountability looks like. It's gonna be rooted in also making sure that all of these archives and all of these stories exist for all of us to have access to. And it'll also be a space that we can really like continue this yeah, just to continue to work from then. And, you know, I've never done anything with this collective without consulting with my elders. And I always want to make sure that that is, like, you know, woven into everything. And so, honestly, like, for all the shit that I've gone through with all of this stuff, I should probably just be like, fuck this, like, this is a lot. But I have such a deep love for my community. So I'm still here.
Ryan, thank you for saying yes. Thank you for not giving up on collective and community work, even when it breaks your heart. And I know that to share that journey publicly then helps all of us who have also had our hearts broken figure out ways to not give up and give in, and to instead just learn and recommit to doing it and more beautifully. So thank you for being here.
I only say yes because, but yes, I'm glad I did it.
As you married into my family. Family, man, it counts for something. So, and last but not least, in terms of this kind of journey we're going on, I just want to also point out, hearing how each of us speaking about like these different decades almost have been like, oh, and it's like Groundhog Day, right? Oh, we're here again, with right-wing, you know, Christian supremacists, white supremacists, murderous regimes, and deportations, and disappearances, and endless war. And so we are also telling the story of continued rebellious spirits and finding each other in the dark and fighting that isolation. So Hannah, I was so glad that you could join us as somebody who in this madness has just opened a space. And so again, because I am so, and I know we all share as comrades, such dedication to our principles matching our policies and our processes matching our principles and manifesting it, right? They're only principles if you actually put them into practice. And my food justice collective, FIG, if anybody are food farmer hospitality workers, you can join us, holler. But we say we want to make the radical practical. We don't want to we don't serve ourselves, and it's not actually very radical to stay in a realm of theory or just signaling and symbolic statements of this and that. So that's why how we do what we do really, really matters. And so Hannah, I would love for you to tell us your story that is in this formation just beginning, but obviously not, because all of this has come before, and share about how you're doing it and who you are and where you are.
Hello. So I'm Henna, and I'm one of the co-founders of Boyfriend Co-op. We've been open for 2 months, so it's a very...
We're rooting for you.
Thanks, it's really hard. But Boyfriend Co-op has been in process for the last 3 years, but has opened its doors 2 months ago. But it's a space that runs as a co-op, so it's worker owned, and it was really built out of the place that I wish that I had, both as like a diasporic person, a Palestinian, a person who wanted to be in spaces that I didn't have to choose, am I my queer side or am I my Arab side, and I could meld the two. Also, like, as a queer person in New York, seeing so many of our spaces centering exclusively on nightlife or exclusively around intoxication, feeling like I like those things, and you need those things to pay the bills if you're gonna operate a space, but it's not all I want, and it's not the only way I think community should be built. So opening a daytime, nighttime space was really like pivotal to the vision. And I think we spend so much time talking about the systems that we want to disrupt. So being a part of a group that is able to like kind of put your money where your mouth is and be able to like actually do that felt really like it felt like being held, and then to get to see people in the space every day, like in the daytime and the nighttime, was really special as well. But I don't know, yeah, it's definitely sort of like a dystopian feeling of how much like code switching there is to be thinking about family back home and be present here and be thinking about like, oh, now I've taken on the responsibility of 10 different people's rents, and wanting to be like an ethical business owner who operates under capitalism and has Zionist landlords but is operating an anti-Zionist space, and only wanting to work with vendors where values align, but wanting to pay an equitable living wage, but then also being able to pay our rent. It's just like this crazy cycle where you have to wear so many different hats, and then you're also, yeah, I don't know, I'm rambling now, but basically it is a difficult thing to balance. And my girlfriend hears me complaining about this all the time of like, you know, I can create this like leftist utopia that centers Palestine, and it feels really special to be able to build these communities and have these people in my space, but it's so uncomfortable to exist in a disparity where I'm like organizing a Canva flyer for a dance party and then seeing corpses of children, where it feels like the work I'm doing isn't that radical in the grand scheme of things, where it's like, yes, I'm building a space for diasporic Palestinians or American leftists or New York immigrants, and like, yeah, I can donate a portion of proceeds to Gaza or to Yemen or to Syria, but like, where is the line of like self-fulfilling, like I get to pat myself on the back versus I'm actually doing tangible work? And even now, like I said, we're such a baby business, and so much of the work is fresh and new and trial and error, and like the original vision of the space has transformed so many times just to exist under what's like productive and reasonable. Like the original iteration of the business was like, we're gonna have a no-tip model and we're gonna give everyone health care, and then it's like, okay, you'll be open for 2 weeks and then you'll shut down because that's not tangible. Or like, we'll have like one dance party a month, but we're only gonna have radical workshops where we talk about skill sharing and skill building and like build a bunker in the basement and give it to activists for free. And I'm like, fuck, I can't do that either. Like, it's just like, it's a hard line to be around. But we're trying our best.
Damn. And so this is why it is, you know, there isn't any either or. I also think about why I'm not on the march to Gaza right now, right? Or on the flotilla trying to break the siege, and we can often then be paralyzed by how impossible it feels, and that's of course by design. And we also have to remember that there are different seasons and cycles, right? That there were times when I was on the front lines trying to stop the building of the apartheid wall in Palestine, and now I'm holding space here and supporting folks who are doing that, you know. So to remember, we also need institutions. We need everything. You weren't rambling. You listed very concrete challenges for creating and cultivating and sustaining ethical, humane, equitable, liberatory institutions. And you heard from all of us here, right, how challenging that is and how crucial it is. And so there is such an important collection of stories in terms of why we do this and then how we do this. And I think that is really important for us to like take away and try to continue. You know, I was saying when we were talking earlier, a lot of the time we're saying, okay, well, how the hell are we, you know, we're experiencing, any of us, not all, you know, some of us are more directly impacted by the horrors of our fascist regime disappearing people off the street, or the constant murder and destruction in Palestine or Sudan, and the list goes on and on. But all of us are being forced to be bystanders. All of us are being dehumanized by this process. That is the goal. And so our way So one of the points here is that we're all in different ways talking about our work is about rehumanizing in all of these ways, and that it's not a theoretical. And so we only have a few more minutes, so I want to give y'all something to think about that we'll just like have a couple minutes to pull from the incredible wisdom and experience that I know is in this room. But I also want to just have a couple minutes for y'all to respond to each other, because this feels like a really precious way of being vulnerable and honest, and also being able to be in dialogue. So I don't know if Tanu and then Karen, like responding since you guys went first, and then we'll wrap in a few minutes with a little bit of a collectivizing the mic.
Yeah, I just, firstly, just so dope what you're doing, and like, I can't wait to come. I haven't been yet, like, and I think that like, these questions that you're wrestling with are real questions, you know, like, it's like, I also like, you know, there's the utopia of what I, you know, hope to do. Like, I want, you know, I just want to do just fundraisers, and then there's the reality of the fact that like, you know, our fundraisers are also limited. There's like billions of dollars that are going into militarization. And like, you know, I think I wrestle with that too. This whole like, what are we doing? Like, there are moments when I'm like, what am I, like, DJing this party is not gonna save anything. And like waking up in the morning and then looking at my phone and like, and seeing, and it is really emotional to see all of these kids, like families, like people just dying in Palestine, in Sudan, all over the global south. And as someone who's from the global south, like the way in which people from the global south, Black and brown people, are dehumanized every day I am so angry. And, you know, I think about, you know, sometimes I feel like it's shallow to be like, you know, well, we're trying to create these snippets of joy, these spaces of joy. And like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I just feel like this is like getting shallow, because like, what does that mean? And then also, they're trying to strip us of any humanity. They're trying to strip us of everything. And like, I remember seeing some videos of, like literally in the rubble in Gaza, and like people were dancing, like during Eid, and just the ways in which, you know, people all around the world in like the worst, like the most terrible situations, like do create moments of joy as resistance is really, really important. And I feel like it is a complicated balance, particularly in a city like New York, which is unaffordable. And by the way, y'all better be voting early and voting for Zoran Mamdani, because I need this shit, we need this shit to change, even just on the local level. So, and I think just spaces that you're creating, like we need them, you know? Like, really excited that Boyfriend Co-op is open. Also, shout out to The Bush, which is a lesbian bar in Bushwick. And I also want to shout out Mike Q's ballroom parties back in the day, which was also like very informative for me, and No Nazar, which is a South Asian party that I also used to DJ. And I also just want to say to Ryan, like, I'm so glad that you brought in what you said around trauma, and like, collectives are hard. It's very, very difficult. But also like, I feel like for me in my 20s, you were so formative. Brooklyn Boyhood was formative. Even for me as a femme to be able to go to you and be like, hey, I was like, hey, people keep grabbing my ass at Brooklyn Boyhood. I want to come and support, but like, can we have a conversation about like gender dynamics? And like, and that was actually an example of like a restorative, like a repair conversation that wasn't about cancel culture. It was about like, let's make these spaces good together, because there needs to be Black trans masc spaces. And I benefited from that as a femme. And I also just want to shout you out, Aura, because when I was in my 20s in New York, like Aura was one of the first people I met doing organizing as a like anti-apartheid Jewish person, like doing work around Palestine, and was working with artists like Dam, bringing them to New York. And so I got involved in Palestinian organizing in my 20s because of a whole coalition of Palestinian, Jewish activists who really brought people in. And so just really want to like acknowledge the work that you did to to cultivate that in New York as a Jewish person.
Just want to say Dem was the first Palestinian hip hop group, and there's an incredible film made by our comrades about the Palestinian hip hop movement called Slingshot Hip Hop. Talk about the cycles of, they really talk about how it was Black liberation movements and hip hop based in the global South within here in the US that inspired them. So that's what Tanu was referring to, and I'm glad you brought them into this space.
I kind of wanted to just jump on what you were saying. I think from the perspective of the 90s in my film, one of the things that, I feel like there's so much to speak on what you're saying. I think it's really hard to see the perspective of what you do it never feels enough. And I feel like that's something that we wear, especially if we come from families that have experienced or personally have experienced trauma. It just never feels enough because we know the weight of what's on the other side. But we just have to trust the intentions that we put into every action that we do. I mean, at the end of the day, one person, even on the front lines, you hear people who are on the front lines who feel ineffective, right? And I think it's just a matter of trusting that the intention of what you're doing is doing something, that it matters, and that it takes the collective. So in my film in the early 90s, or what happened in the early 90s that I documented in my film, you had a lot of radical groups like ACT UP, and there's so many groups organizing, really pushing the front lines. But what made that era so powerful and why so much change happened was that there was this political consciousness that pervaded class, race. It just pervaded the entire society. And when that happened, that's when change really started to shift. So we have to know that we're just playing our part, and that you have to trust that other people are going to step up and play their part. I think it's so heavy, I won't go into my personal family history, but it's so heavy to wear. And I think it's really difficult to step away from the feeling of guilt, of not feeling like you're being effective. I think it's good to constantly question, to see how we can do things better or more effective or connective. But I keep hearing this, and it just, I feel like sometimes it overwhelms more than motivates sometimes. So I just wanted to acknowledge also, the history that can inform us of just appreciating the work that each person does, and that's good. It doesn't have to be more than that. And this is so cliche, the one person that you're creating that space for, who feels seen, who feels like they can connect to a bigger community here through the histories that they come from. That is huge, right? And that will just resonate community-wide. And then here we are speaking about this in this space, and who knows who is connecting to this idea as well. So that's all I wanted to add.
Amen. I feel like I want to honor that. It's one of the points that I think is that we've been making as Queer Aperitivo has been in conversation with queer cultural producers is that, and we were talking, again, Robert, I don't know if you were here earlier when I said this, but now that I see you, I'm going to acknowledge again, Robert curated Everybooty this year in a way that was very thoughtfully engaging with the how do you actually share power, generate resources, actually, he's thinking carefully about the opportunity that he received and how to use it for empowerment and transformation, and to have a space like this to lend, kind of deeper meaning and different ways for queers to engage while we're sandwiched between fashion and beats and booze and all these things, like Henna was saying, to also have this be an essential part of it. So I just want to acknowledge and appreciate that. And love you. And that's not to be taken for granted. And actually, we were talking about, the thing is, when we talk about, the importance of these spaces, and this being about, we were saying that, sustaining the fight, deepening our connections to ourselves, our bodies, each other, our music, our culture, our history, we're not all coming into this in the same. We can't act like all gays are the same, right? So there's some gays that have plenty of partying and joy and release and escape and pleasure, and that is coming to them very easy. And so for them, we want to say, we invite you to think about, just like we're thinking about, how do we actually try to access joy and energy and sensuality, and as our sage Audre Lorde says, the power of the erotic. We're trying to do that with and for folks who, for whom it can be very difficult. And then we're inviting the gays who reside in a place of a lot of privilege and easy pleasure to say, how can you actually escalate your participation in disruption, in challenge? How can you redistribute some of your ease and your resources that include like time and venues and graphic design and whatever else, and redistribute some of that so some of the rest of us can actually have a little bit more support in healing. And so I also just want to honor that y'all shared, like these are folks who just shared how they shared their histories. You guys shared your histories and your people and some of your story of challenge and grief and trauma, and we are blessed by it. And we are lucky that you have, with your broken hearts, continued to create spaces of joy and inspiration and sensuality and sexiness and connection and fierceness for all of us. And it makes me think of, if I ever am feeling like, damn, I can't do this, you're making me think about, like you said, we have so much to learn from the samud, the steadfastness of Palestinians who also under military occupation for decades have been like holding weddings and, making art and all these things. I always think about Asada's poem that she wrote while in solitary confinement in the basement of a maximum security men's prison. And she said, while in those conditions, a wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. And if she can channel that, then I better get information. And so before we close, and I know we're a few minutes over, but before we close, I wanted to have a very specific invitation to everybody here. I just as this practice of kind of acknowledging the lineage and naming the DJs, the elders, the icons, the spaces, just as these folks did, I was wondering if folks here could share and just shout out some legendary, iconic people, places, parties, moments that maybe didn't get mentioned here, because of course we just can share our little piece of the story in an hour.
Body hack.
Yeah, the Maritime RIP.
Yes, Arabato Queer in Queens, repping for Queens. Shout out to Andoki Bougie. DJ Reka, Basement Bungra.
Babe Wine Bar.
Huge shout out to Cecilia Gentili, who passed away last year, who was an incredible trans Latina organizer.
Soul Summit. St. James Joy.
Reggae. You remember reggae?
Let this remind us of how abundant our energy in our community is. Let us promise that we will learn to take better care of ourselves and each other, and that we will be able to be honest and brave in our engagement with each other and as generous and compassionate as possible. And let us commit to helping each other access our joy and our ease and our inspiration, while also committing to facing the heavy, hard shit we're up against. I think sometimes that is the part that gets lost. And so I do really want to end on that note. We do need to remember that we need to fight. And so we need to be figuring out whatever that looks like for us, given our skills, our resources, our abilities, our privileges and powers or differences in those things, and do something that escalates the disruption and the rebellion. And we will be ranking Zohran 1 and not ranking Cuomo, right? Right, homos? Please remember, support these folks. Please remember that how you do it, who you do it, we need concrete resources, not Instagram posts, y'all.
Can I do a quick little plug? Also, because so many of our projects are like pop-ups and they're moving and they're all throughout the city, having a brick and mortar is really valuable. So if anyone does want a physical space to do workshops, fundraisers, events, radical education, having a place to organize, come find me. We would love to host you anytime.
Yes. Thank you for
Boyfriend
doing
Co-op, 7 days a week.
7 days a week. Thank you for doing that work. Thank you for learning what I'm sure you'll be learning about cooperative economics and how to build a more queer, collaborative world. And thank you again to Robert and Bam and Everybooty for making this space. And thank you all for giving us your attention and your energy. We will see you in the streets and on the dance floor.